Today, we're going to be diving into some training and tutorials for activity tracking inside of Zoho CRM. So this is going to capture tasks, meetings, and calls. In the front half of the video, we're going to be running through how to create and manage these kind of from the user perspective. Then in the back half, we're going to show how to create some reports and kind of views into these so that a manager can see what's going on with activities inside of CRM. So with that, let us jump right on in. Here we are inside of Zoho CRM. You'll notice I'm on this classic view of the homepage. Bit of a spoiler alert, we'll come back to that in a little bit. The first thing I want to do is just quickly touch on the three types of activities that exist inside of Zoho CRM. So the first is a task. A task is essentially a thing that needs to be done by a certain date. This could be sending a follow-up email. Some people use it for placing a phone call, scheduling a meeting, sending a quote, etc. The next one is going to be a call. A call is a record that basically means that a phone call happened on a date for a certain amount of time. The important thing with phone calls as well is being able to track kind of like the outcome and purpose of these calls so that we know what exactly happened. I'll get into all that in kind of a walkthrough in a moment. I'll also note with calls, oftentimes these are going to be generated automatically via some type of connected voice over IP system. Last one are meetings. These are like your calendar events. So let's say I had a task to send an email following up to see if I can get a meeting scheduled. They say, hey, yeah, that works for me. Let's do it on Friday at 11 a.m. I can go ahead and actually send out that meeting request directly here from inside of the CRM. Now, I'm showing these inside of each of their respective modules, right, where I can see just tasks, just calls, and just meetings. A lot of the times these are used in reference to or in relation to some type of other record, right? So I'm actually going to create a couple of these activities here linked up to a deal. Now, inside of every record in CRM, whether it's a lead, contact, account, deal, etc., you're always going to have the ability to track activities, right? And it's going to live in this related list here over on the left-hand side. Now, if I want to add a new activity, which I'll do now, I can either do that via the plus button here in the related list menu or in the add new section of that related list. So let's add a task. Let's say we want to follow up on setting discovery meeting. And let's say that they told me, hey, this is something that, follow up on Friday. I've got a really busy week. I can then set my priority, right? I can set this to be owned by me or potentially by somebody else. Little tip, if you're like a manager or admin, you can create a task and set it to assign to somebody that is not you. You can set these as repeating tasks. Pretty rare that we do that, admittedly. And we can also set that they give me some type of reminder, either via an email or a pop-up on a particular date. Someone can go ahead and turn that on here. Outside of that, right, we'll see that this task is related to both a contact and to a deal. In the case of creating tasks off of deals, you're almost always going to also link it to that contact. Now, here we see we now have that open tasks set up. We can change the views here. I'm going to create a couple records first, and then I'll show you that. Now, let's say that we've got a meeting coming up as well. We can create a meeting record. We'll call this our discovery meeting. You can choose a venue here, either in office, at their location, or online. We're going to, let's say, do online. If you choose that, it's going to ask you to connect in a meeting provider, whether that's Zoho Meeting or Zoom. We can also then choose, again, that from and to. So let's say we're going to have that the following Friday at 11. I can add people to my participants list, basically from my related contacts. So if I did have anybody that actually wanted to make sure they received a calendar invite, I can do that here. It's going to kind of default and allow me to set them as a participant, again, meaning that contact related to the deal. I can choose if I want reminders. And then, of course, we've got a couple custom fields here that we've set up. But that meeting record will actually go out and send them, an ICS calendar invite that they can add directly to their calendar. So I'm going to save that here. Doesn't fall within business hours. That's okay. I'm going to not send this email because I know the email address on that contact isn't real. So I'm not going to, send a bounce. And then lastly here with our calls, I'll tell you, there's really a couple ways that calls get in. Like I mentioned earlier, you very likely, if you're doing a lot of phone calls, have a connected voice over IP. If you don't, maybe reach out to somebody like Zenatta. We'll help you get that integrated. Essentially, you can log calls in a few different ways. I can schedule one for the future. I can log one that already happened, or I can just call now. Again, if I have that tool connected, I'm going to log a call that happened in the past. Let's say that we had an outbound call last week. Let's say on Friday, we called them. We spoke for about 10 minutes. So we'll add a 10-minute call. Now, subject, it's going to automatically set itself as incoming or outgoing call to that person. Let's say that the purpose of this call was prospecting, and the result was that they're interested, right? Result becomes a really important thing to track here in your calling, because it's very likely that you've got some workflows and automation set up that do kind of follow-ups or prompts based on these outcomes, right? So if I were to say a call result is not interested, maybe that updates a lead status, right? Or maybe if call result is interested, we set up a follow-up task for the future. So I'll go ahead and log this call now. So now we can see we've got these 3 records, or do we? That call, because it's in the past, automatically moves itself down here to our closed activities section. So if we want a bit more clarity, we can bring those right next to each other here. And we'll click save. And so now we get that full picture, right? Here's everything that we're going to do in the future related to this particular deal. And here's a call that happened in the past related to this deal. We'll see that for our tasks, we're actually able to close them out directly from this record. So I technically don't need to click into the task to close it. I surely can, but it's not required that I do that. Meetings, a little different. You don't really close those out. They'll kind of be here until the date that they're supposed to occur. Then they'll move into that closed meeting section automatically. And one last thing that I'll note here is that as we're looking at our list of records, you will see these little pop-ups and flags here. These are for tasks, and they're color-coded based on the due date of that task, right? So red being something that's overdue. This is from May 3rd, 2024, so that's very overdue. If I were to come in here, and let's say I just adjusted that task to be due today, for example, so I'll just come in here just for the point of our example and jump back into our deals, give this a quick refresh. You'll now see that changes into yellow, right? So that's something that's due today. And then things that are red due in the past, things that are green due in the future. Now, all of these records are going to show up in their own respective modules. So if I go into tasks, I can now see that task that's been assigned to me that's currently open. Let's say I want to be more of like an admin view. I could look at all open tasks. And now I see ones that are assigned to me as well as assigned to other people. So I'm Demo 6 admin. Demo 6 user also has a handful of tasks here. Calls are going to be that same thing. I can see any of the calls that have occurred. I can apply filters to those to see things that are completed or things that are coming up, right? So things that I'm going to still have to do in the future. Those are all just going to be kind of our default custom views here. And then similarly, the meetings are all going to show inside of their own meetings module. Now, I will note with meetings, that's not the only place that they show up. If you are looking for a calendar view in this new CRM for Everyone UI, that does live down here in the bottom left, where I can come in and see, by day, by week, by month, what types of meetings I have coming up. So I could actually see the meeting that I just created for next Friday does show up here. I can actually open this up, reschedule if I have to, resend the invitation if I'd like to. And all of that here will show inside of my calendar view. For an admin, if you want to see everybody's calendar, you can go into this all users view and then flip around. I will tell you, I find this most useful in the week view. I think month just gets a little bit hard to manage if there's a lot of meetings across everything. So do keep that in mind. Like if you have many users setting up meetings in here, going week by week basically gives each of them their own row. And I do just think that's a little bit more intuitive and easy to actually keep an eye on. I want to go back to our homepage for a moment because this homepage is quite useful. If I go ahead and look at this top bar and I go to like my open activities this week, it is actually going to show me all these various activities that are scheduled within this time period. Now, right now I'm just seeing one because I just have this one task that's for this week. Let's imagine instead that our meeting was set for this upcoming Friday. So within the current week rather than in the following week. So we'll say, hey, we're going to save that meeting. Now, if I come back in, I'll actually see tasks and meetings within one list. So for like a day-to-day user who's in here using the CRM, this classic view is really useful, right? Because it might not give me all of the graphs and all the charts, right? If I look at like my pipeline dashboard, it's like, ooh, pretty colors, right? I can see my funnel. But if you want a really useful place to just make sure that you're keeping up with all these various activities that you've set up, because again, you might create some tasks, the system might create some tasks for you, right? That actually set up your own follow-ups and your own tracking. And so all of that here is going to display within this classic view where you can kind of see like, hey, what's on deck for this week? What's on deck for next week? What do I need to be keeping an eye on, right? Down here below on the classic view, you'll also get a filter just into tasks. So if I wanted to see like, hey, what am I dropping the ball on here? Oh, cool, nothing. I don't have any tasks that are overdue. So now maybe I'll flip back to my open tasks and track those and make sure I'm keeping up to date with everything that's scheduled for the future or scheduled for today, right? But maybe it isn't just overdue quite yet. So that's kind of the long and short here for tasks, calls, and meetings from a user perspective. I will note one last thing here. If you are using your calendar outside of Zoho, like we use a lot of Google Calendar internally to like set meetings and manage those. Maybe you're using like Calendly and Google Calendar like we are. You can set up calendar integrations as long as it's enabled by your admin here. So if you are using one of those third-party calendaring tools, if you jump over to Marketplace over here on the left, this little orange one, and go into either Google or Microsoft, you can connect your calendars directly, right? So it will actually offer the opportunity to come in and connect your calendar and display that within Zoho CRM. I'll highlight as you do this, I do recommend a few things. So when you're enabling this calendar integration, it will give you the option of doing either one-way or two-way syncing. Make sure to set that up very intentionally. Like if you know that all of your meetings are going to be scheduled through Calendly and Google Calendar, just set it up as a one-way, right? That pulls in those Google events or Microsoft events into Zoho CRM. If you know that you're going to schedule all of your, client-related meetings within Zoho, set it up as a one-way from Zoho into Google, right? You only want to use that two-way sync if you're actually going to be creating the relevant types of meetings on both sides. And I would say that really applies for Google and Microsoft. You might as well just make sure that you're good there. You don't want like arbitrary stuff getting created in either calendar that isn't relevant. So just do be aware of that. Now, before we continue, I do want to ask real quick, if you're finding the video useful so far, be sure to like and subscribe down below. That's a totally free way to help us out. Leave me a comment with any types of videos you'd like to see and any questions on this video, and head on over to Zenatta.com and click on book a meeting if you'd like to talk about how we can help set up your Zoho account for you. Let's keep rolling. Now what we're going to do is jump into kind of more from a manager or admin's perspective on some of the ways that we can automate activities so we can create them automatically and manage them. I'm also going to show you a couple reports that you'll oftentimes want to check out just to make sure that things are going smoothly across the organization. Let's jump into automation first. So if I go into our settings here, and I'm going to go into workflow rules, do keep in mind these tasks can be created in lots of different ways. I'm going to show workflows here. You can also create them via blueprints, but workflows are going to be our primary method. Now, a few different ways that we can create tasks automatically. One of them is going to be by triggering that task creation via what I'll call the parent record. So I'm going to have an update to a deal. That's going to create a child record of a task, right? So let's say on stage, create task, just as a simple workflow. So let's say I want to have a record action. We're going to say on edit to the stage value here. So when stage is modified to the value, let's say value proposition. Now I can apply filters, kind of general workflow training here. If I only want this to happen in certain scenarios, I can filter that down. So maybe it's like, hey, for existing business, we don't need to do this. This is only relevant for new business deals that hit value proposition. Down here below, I can actually create any of my activities. So if I do want to create and assign a task, I can do that here. Now, I have a template task that I could just grab. I'm going to show you creating one. So let's say you want to send value proposition documents. As we're automating these, the due date is going to be relative to something else. So I could say like 2 days after it enters the stage. I could also say like, 2 days before the closing date. Again, for a lot of workflow stuff, oftentimes it's going to be based on the trigger date, essentially when we entered a certain stage or step. Then we'll set up who should be the owner of this task. Bit of a pro tip here. Oftentimes, you actually leave this empty, right? If you leave task owner empty, then the task owner will be whoever owns that deal or that lead or that account, right? Whatever that parent record is. And I'll go ahead and save and associate this. So now I'll click save. Let's go into our deal and actually see this work, right? Don't just take my word for it. Let's actually take a look at it. So with our deal open here, I do want to double check. Okay, cool. Type as new business. If you saw a little edit there, it's because I forgot to set that. So now we'll go ahead and update this to value proposition. That should trigger our workflow in the background here to create that task. We can see that happened here in the timeline. And back on our deal, once we give this a refresh, we'll see that we now have an additional task that has been created and set up for us. It looks like in my workflow, I must have had that set as -2 days. So the due date is 2 days in the past, so we can see here, -2, this should have been +2. But we can see that that task gets created right away and linked up to this deal. Similarly, if I go back to that homepage like I showed earlier, that user will see, I have an overdue task due to a workflow error, but it's still overdue. I better get it done right away. So keep in mind, those tasks will get created automatically, but they'll still show up in the same types of places that you can see any of your manually created tasks. Now, that's not all. I want to show another type of trigger criteria and condition for activities, and that's what I'm going to call the daisy chain, right? Essentially, something happening to activity 1 might require activity 2 getting created. So if I go in and I create a rule here, let's say I want to do some type of follow-up activity based on a call. So let's say if they're interested, follow up. Now here, we're going to do a record action. We're going to say when an outgoing call is logged or modified. And we're going to say, hey, we're going to apply this to certain types of rules. So this could either be for, leads or contacts. We're going to say, we'll do all. And then we'll say, hey, what do we want to set up as conditions for this? So this is where I would actually track something like outcome, right? If my outcome is a certain value or call result, is, let's say, interested, we're going to do some type of follow-up activity. So here, I'll go ahead and create a task. We're going to say, hey, follow up on interested contact plus deal. We'll do our trigger date +7, let's say, just give them 1 week to do that follow-up. And then actually I'll do +6. And then we'll go ahead and save and associate. Now, you might be thinking, this is just a call, right? Is this going to end up linked to that same deal, to that same contact, right? Because I don't just want a call record to get created and it's like, hey, call them. And I'm like, cool, who? Who do I call? So if I were to come in here, let's say I log a call. We'll log one that happened in the past. So let's say this was on last Friday, for example. And let's say, we'll say it was a 10-minute call with a nice round number. And let's say that our outcome was interested, right? If I save this, what we should have is that a task gets created. We can see, boom, it did already. There it is, follow up on interested contact plus deal. So I show this to demonstrate that when you are creating these different workflow rules and you've associated them with an activity record like a call, there's a bit of Zoho magic behind the scenes where it kind of assumes, hey, you know what? When I make this task, I'm going to link it to the same stuff that call was linked to, because we can kind of assume it's a follow-up related to that thing. So even though the deal is actually never mentioned in any step as I'm creating that workflow, it knows and it intuits like, yeah, this should be associated to that same record, and it just handles that for us, right? So that's going to be the same thing if you create a workflow off of tasks. Like we'll oftentimes have like, hey, before I follow up to set this discovery meeting, I need to send these documents. You could do a workflow where on completion of a task where the name is A, create a task where the name is B, right? So start thinking about how one task leads to another, and you'll find a lot of opportunities to create those automations. Last thing I want to show here is, as a manager, the ability to kind of track and view these tasks, right? So if I were to go in, let's say as a manager, I want to see overdue tasks, right? I can come right in here into my list view, and I can just pull a filter of overdue tasks, right? In here, I could then filter by the owner, right? And I could say, hey, show me all the overdue tasks from the admin user, right? Okay, they just got this one, and technically it was due to a workflow error, so they're probably fine. Let's check out our Demo 6 user. Like, they've got overdue stuff from like January of this year. It's November as I record this, and something from last year that we never followed up on. Like, that's a problem. So I can actually take a look at this view and see them from here. Another thing that we can do is create more of like a report structure around this. This is generally what people end up doing. So I can come into my reports and I can create a new report here up in the top left. I can choose a primary module. I'm going to do tasks in this one. Now, I can also choose related modules. So sometimes you'll have a report that looks at like overdue tasks related to leads, overdue tasks related to deals. I'm going to go with deals here because they're kind of the higher priority generally, right? Like if they're already a deal, we know they're qualified. We know that we should be working them. What we can also do is choose, how we want to structure this. So if you do want any other types of modules, if you do want any other types of records, you can go ahead and apply those. I'm going to keep it simple in this example. Now we're going to call this our overdue tasks for deals. I'm going to select a folder. Let's say we want to track this under our deal reports. So I'll click save. Now we've got video tutorials on managing these types of reports in detail. I'm going to go ahead and go through this relatively quickly, but I will explain what I'm doing as I go. So I've removed a couple columns there. I always just like to start from scratch here where we want to see, hey, the subject of the task, the contact, and the deal. Honestly, in my case, I'm even going to get rid of contact. I like to keep these really simple. I'm going to go to the deal anyways, and really that's going to give me the information about what I need to know. Now, I'm going to go into filters. I always like to do my filters first. So if I want to see overdue tasks, I'm going to look at where status isn't something good. So let's say completed. Maybe I'll get rid of deferred as well if that's something that we use to say like, hey, we're going to do this in the future. I would always recommend with something that's deferred, you update the due date. So actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it in. I don't think any of my tasks satisfy that, but I'm going to leave it in because it makes me feel better. Now, what we can also do is add another for our due date, right? So here, we'll basically go with something that is relative. So if our age of the due date is greater than 0, we'll do a greater than 0, basically meaning the date is some number of days in the past. That's what age in days means. So if it's greater than 0, that means it's some number of days into the past. That'll filter that down. You'll notice there, a lot of them went away that were scheduled for the future or that were already closed, right? Now, we can add some other fields here. We might want something like our status. We might want something like our due date. So we'll click and save. I can see those here. One other thing that I can do, I might want to add some data from that deal module, right? Maybe I want the closing date and the stage of that deal because those help me contextualize what's going on, right? Like maybe I see a task, but it's in the proposal stage and it's like, yeah, maybe we're waiting to get feedback from them. So that bit of extra context can be valuable for me. Now, I always recommend ordering these in a nice way. Last thing we might want is something like our owner, right? It is useful for us to know who's actually in charge of this task. Now, let's think about how we actually might want to format this. In my case, I might want to group this up a little bit. So maybe I want to group by my task owner, right? And put that over here. Now, maybe I'd actually want to group by my deal owner instead. I could do that if I so choose. So I could choose deal owner, right? Now, this is now going to do a subgrouping. I kind of recommend one or the other. Makes the most sense. So I'm going to get rid of deal owner for now, but I did just want to show that. So now I have this report. It's basically showing me what are all these tasks that are related to deals where they are overdue, right? Last thing I might want to do here, I can see this one here is technically a task that is linked to a lead, right? And we can tell because the deal name is empty. So I might want to add one more filter here. If I do want this to be specifically for deals, I might want to come in and apply some type of filter here that basically requires that it is linked to a deal, right? So maybe I'll just do something simple like the created time in the deal is not empty, right? Because we know that every single deal is going to have a created time. And so that would just get rid of a task that's an errant task not linked up to a particular deal record. So now I can basically see, hey, here's all my deals. Here's all the tasks that are linked to them that are overdue. I'll go ahead and click save. Now, one last tip here. These can be exported and sent via email. So if you do want to get these regularly, you can definitely do that. What we can also do is actually create them as a scheduled report. So let's say every single Monday, I want to see, hey, what's overdue, right? I can come into, sorry, I did that a little quick. This is always a bit hidden. You got to go into scheduled reports here, go into new report scheduler. Then I can choose my deal reports and I'll choose my overdue tasks. I can choose how I want to receive this. Let's say XLS is fine. I always show the record ID. You probably don't need it, but I like it. And then let's say we'll start this next Monday and we're going to repeat this weekly on some number of repeats. And then I can either send it via email or via Zoho Click directly to whoever I need, right? So this could go to a channel or a user on the Click side, or it can go to a certain set of users, groups, roles, etc. if I'm going to email it out via the CRM scheduler. So that basically gives you a way to know, hey, every Monday, I'm going to get an email at 8 a.m. And then I'm going to know that there's these set of things that are overdue that need to be managed. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. Another one that you might think about, though, is something like, hey, show me calls. Take this as a homework item. Show me calls where the scheduled time of the call is in the past and there's no outcome or result logged. Right? That's a really good little data audit tool, right? That you could basically set up to say, hey, we're placing all these calls. We need to know how they're going because we have workflows set up. We have reports set up. We want to know how effective different lead sources are at actually people picking up the phone. So like, hey, I desperately need to know, did this person pick up? Are they interested? Are they a good lead? You can set all of those types of activity tracks against these particular types of records. I would look at doing the same thing for meetings. Right? If you had some type of outcome field on a meeting, go ahead and create a report that looks at that date and looks at that status and gets things in front of you that need to be audited and managed by your team. So with that, I think we've kind of wrapped up here on activity tracking for the day. I really do hope it was useful for you on the front end in terms of how these work and how to manage them. And then on the back end, how can we automate and report on them? This is a really core part of CRM. Like, when you adopt a CRM, you don't just want to put all your data in here and use it as a contact list, right? Like you really want to try to define like, what is our process, right? How does it work? What types of things do we do? What types of meetings do we hold, right? And the more of it that you can manage in here, the more value you're going to get out of CRM, both from a user in terms of making sure that I get my stuff done and increase my own closing rate, and as an admin, making sure that we're able to actually pull data, right? Like a big use case, like I mentioned, is you've got all these different lead sources. One of them never picks up the phone, right? Maybe let's not spend money on that lead source anymore. We're not getting any movement out of it, right? So make sure that you've got this type of thing set up, even if it's at a basic level, and you just have a couple stage-based tasks and reminders. Oftentimes, after people really get going, they can't live without this. That's always our goal. Make this thing useful, make it simple to use, and get it in front of those users. So with that, I think we're ready to wrap up here for today. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe down below. Totally free way to help us out. While you're down there, leave a comment. Let me know any other videos, topics, or angles that you'd like to see Zoho from. I'm always happy to get those up on the channel for you. My name is Tyler Colt, and I will see you next time.